Hey guys, UnoPro here. Today, just wanted to do something a little bit different. Instead of showing a replay or, going over some tournament games or something, what I want to do, I just want to talk a little bit about a couple things. They're really sparking some talk in the community, and they have been for a while. So, first of all, just wanted to cover something, a bit about the community mindset. Now, obviously, it's no secret there have been a lot of people unhappy with the state of the game, unhappy with some of the changes, unhappy with the lack of support at times, a whole bunch of things. People saying the game is dead. And first of all, I have to disagree that the game is dead. Whenever I play a Swiss, it's often only taking a minute, and sometimes a minute for just a ranked game, sometimes 30 seconds, sometimes 10 seconds. And I mean, if I go play a game of League of Legends, game of Hearthstone, queue times aren't really any different. So maybe the people that aren't on the forums are the ones actually playing. I'm not sure exactly, but people do tend to be negative, and that's just a fact of life. So what I wanted to really address was, obviously, there's people who are saying, the game's dead, we're not getting enough support or anything. Obviously, they do care about the game, because otherwise they wouldn't be staying around on the forums, posting these kind of things. They do actually care about the game, and I can definitely understand why people are frustrated. And I'm not going to say I've been 100% sure the game is going to be great forever, or it's going to actually continue, to be healthy and stay alive. But the thing is, the gameplay hasn't changed, and that's what's really always, been the main factor. I can go try other games, I like them for a bit, but I always come back to Duel Champions because of the gameplay. Just the amount of decisions from one turn is incredible compared to other card games. And I've played, nearly every card game there is at times. And there's really not as many decisions from turn one as any in Duel Champions. You can choose whether you want to block, you can choose whether you play in front row or back row, which creature you're going to play. You can already need to be thinking a couple turns ahead, loading up requirements. There's so many different decisions. And you really can show the skill testing nature of the game just by, I remember JKK, scoring a 40-game win streak, something incredible like that. And sure, maybe you need a little bit of luck to get 40 wins, but you definitely need a lot of skill. So, my main point that I'm trying to get here is that, we know the game is good. So, what that means is we need support from the community managers, from the developers, but we need support from the community. If you think about this, if you're a game developer, or you're the one in charge of the decisions, that kind of stuff, and you go on the forums of your game, and you see everyone talking about how the game is dead, the game's being ruined by these new managers, then they're not going to put in the extra yards to do it. If I'm a developer, obviously at the end of the day they still have to make some kind of money, and they're not going to waste money increasing the quality of the game if they don't think the community is going to be there. So if the community saying is dead, there's no way that the people in charge are going to be motivated, to make changes for the better. So if the community actually shows, we're still passionate about this game, we're still here, we're still wanting to play, and I'm sure many people are still actually wanting to play, then I feel like they'll be more inclined. It's not a us versus them thing, it's us working together. And in the past, I know community managers have been very, very ingrained into the community. They're on our side. There's no secret about that. They're trying to, they help us help them. And it's really a two-way relationship. So if people are a little bit more positive, obviously, then I feel like the people in charge will really help us make the changes we want. If people go on Reddit and they see someone asking, is the game worth coming back to, and people saying the game is dead, I mean, if I was a game developer, of course I wouldn't be putting all my resources in there. But if I see people saying, yeah, sure there's a small community, but the community is really helpful, which I have found in the past, one of the best communities I've ever been a part of in gaming, for the most part really, is, yeah, then I'm going to think this community can grow, we can help put the things in that they will pay for, they will enjoy, like alternate asks, which have been on the Chinese server. So, I didn't want to talk about this for too long, a bit of a negative subject, and I know it's been an ongoing problem. But all I'm saying is, we be a bit more positive. We encourage those people trying to try out the game, the community will see this, and we're on their side. You know, we all love the game. We all realize just how good the gameplay is. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So, just something to think about. Obviously, I'm not saying anyone's in the wrong by being a bit disappointed by a couple things or being unhappy. And we should be criticizing the game, but only to make it better, not because we're angry or over what's happened. So anyway, enough of that. What I wanted to talk about, something I see a lot on the forums, is discussion about Kal-Azaar and if he is OP. And I think it's a very interesting spot. I think he might be on the verge of OP. And I think kind of some of the hate from Kal-Azaar actually extends over into a bit of Inferno. Whereas obviously Inferno is very strong, don't get me wrong. But I feel like there's a couple different strengths of Kal-Azaar that really push him over the edge compared to some other characters. So basically I want to talk about, you know, what makes him so strong, maybe a couple possible changes, but also every hero has weaknesses, and I feel like there's definitely a deck out there that can really work well against Kal-Azaar. So I've got a couple ideas I just want to talk about, very vague, something you maybe come up with yourself as well. So what makes him so strong? And I feel like I can sum this down into one word, and it is versatility. Kal-Azaar is by far the most versatile hero in the game when it comes to the versatility you can have from different game to game with the same deck. Now, what I mean by this is that, well, personally, let me introduce by saying, when I play Kal-Azaar, I tend to play a kind of aggro control list. So it has the 1-drops, it has the aggressive 2-drops and 3-drops, but it also still has the Akras, 1 or 2 enthralls, you know, the spell stealers, that kind of stuff. And basically what this means is that you can really adapt to a matchup, and the strength is, I can start off 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, and sometimes when you play Inferno, the aggressiveness of the creatures, sometimes that just win you games. But then, later on in the game, I can play up to 8 Akras Wraths in the same deck as I'm playing a bunch of aggressive 1 and 2-drops. Now, normally you think, well, there's a couple reasons most decks can't do this. First of all, most classes, heroes, you know, they don't have access to aggressive 1 and 2-drops. Mainly only Inferno and Stronghold. But Stronghold normally a bit harder to have a controlling deck with. So if you're playing something like Academy, sure you can have early drops, but they're not really putting anywhere near the kind of pressure an Inferno early creature will put on. But the reason this works for Kal-Azaar and some other decks, but not so much for, you know, your Academies and some of even your other Inferno decks, is just the nature of Kal-Azaar. And basically, the easiest way to look at this is just consider the 1-drop, 2/1/2, you know, very standard melee kind of beater. In any normal deck, you draw this late in the game, you're thinking, well, it's basically useless. It's not going to come down to anything. It can't block. It's going to get easily blocked. It's not going to do anything. Kal-Azaar, at the very worst, you can just discard to your hero ability. Well, you think you can do that with any card, so that doesn't mean that big a deal. But there's also so much extra utility with it. You can even use it for time jump. It's just 2 damage for 1 mana. Just the versatility of Kal-Azaar is so good. And something I also want to talk about, what I think make Kal-Azaar really good, is just the power of the fire and dark schools, especially when compared together. And I was actually talking a bit about this when I was drafting Kirill on the Chinese server, who also has dark and fire. And I believe this is probably the best combination of spell schools. I could be wrong, it's just my personal opinion. Basically, the reason I feel like it's so strong, first of all, everyone knows Dark School is the best for dealing with single creatures. It has kill spells, it has steal spells, it has everything for dealing with individual creatures. So obviously, the weakness is it doesn't have any AoE, which is easily filled by Akras Wrath in the Fire School, which no other deck can abuse better than Kal-Azaar. So basically, you can deal with the big creatures and with the small creatures, which makes him very frustrating to play against. But it's not only that, is that sometimes you get these wins where you're versing a 90% creature deck, and let's just say you're starting second, maybe you gain a resource to play a 3-drop really early on. And you get a couple aggressive early creatures out. And your opponent has no removal, just creatures, so they're relying on creatures to block. And if you have a handful of early creatures, and then you just draw removal, you get a lot of free wins, a surprising amount, of just killing the creature, attack for 4, killing the creature, attack again, killing the creature, attack again. And not only is it this, but having access to fire, just having access, having your opponent know they're never going to block unless there's a 2 HP difference between the attack and the health. Because Firebolt and Forked Firebolt, you're just very hard cards to play against if you're trying to block with creatures. And even if you finally get a 7 HP creature against that Juggernaut, well, it looks like Kal-Azaar still has a Soul Reaver. So guys, I may make it seem like Kal-Azaar is the most ridiculous deck in the world, and it is incredibly strong. But we're also going to have to analyze some of the weaknesses later on. But of course, Time Jump. Not a lot needs to be said about this card. Even less needs to be said in such an aggro control deck like Kal-Azaar, especially with the ability to push through damage for free with your hero ability, 0 mana cost. Makes the deck really well. Also, one of the main things with Kal-Azaar and a lot of Inferno decks is Spellstealer Heretic. And when I saw this card for the first time, I basically thought, Ubisoft, what are you thinking? And the card is insane. Just the ability to have constant Akras Wrath, but normally, like, okay, let's just say that the card instead was a 3 mana 1/1, and before it entered the battlefield, it just had another Akras Wrath. Okay, that's a really good card. But not only this, it can also, if you have a Soul Reaver in the yard, now it's a Banshee with better stats. Now, obviously, you need to have something in the yard, but these are good spells anyway. We're not playing bad cards to fill our graveyard. So the card is just very, very good, and it's very versatile, and it just adds even more to the versatility of Kal-Azaar. And also, beatdown versus control. The control deck in a certain matchup will really change on the pace of the game, who the deck is. One game you might be aggro with a Stronghold deck, and then you verse a really heavy Inferno Rush, and suddenly you're the controlling deck. And Kal-Azaar just plays both roles so beautifully. He plays aggressive Inferno creatures, which are really hard to block because of Firebolt and that kind of stuff. And then he can also play control with wrathing the board over and over again, stealing creatures with stuff like Magic Steal and Thrall. He just has it all, and that's what really is the strength of Kal-Azaar, and is the reason I believe he's the best deck in the game, at least in standard format. It's just how versatile he is. If you made him just a really good control deck, that's really good at, dealing with single creatures. Sure, he's a weakness. We play a lot of early creatures to try and rush him down, but in the current form we run into Akras Wrath. Also, one thing is non-stronghold creatures have a really hard time against Kal-Azaar because they just don't have the HP to survive Akras Wrath, and as a card you're going to face a lot when versing at Kal-Azaar. Even the Sanctuary 5-drop that has Magic Shield, designed to just, stop you from spells, just instantly dies to Akras Wrath for free. And there's just not a lot of good of high HP drops that are really doing enough to really, punish Kal-Azaar. And even he is, most of the other classes apart from Stronghold really don't have that many aggressive creatures, so he can just clean it up with the next one without taking too much damage. But of course, there are some weaknesses. Now, whilst Kal-Azaar may be the best deck, that doesn't mean there can't be a deck out there that is really, really good against Kal-Azaar. Now, obviously, because of the versatility, that is even harder. But I feel like we're close, but we're not quite there yet. So, a couple of weaknesses. I do play a bit of Kal-Azaar myself. Obviously, I'm a competitive player at heart, so I will tend to try most of the meta decks. And I actually do enjoy the really aggro control, bit of versatility. It's something I always do in every card game I play. So, try not to hate me too much, but I honestly do feel like he needs a bit of a nerf, and I feel like it'll be good for the game. But some of his weaknesses are obviously high HP points. Now, it's a little counterintuitive because dark schools can just deal with these big HP creatures regardless. But Aka's Wrath is really the turning point. That's what makes the deck unfair, is being able to play multiples of that card. So high HP cards, such as like an Elephant, 3 mana, 7 health is just huge. Obviously Dark Ward is really good against him. Because if something's out of Aka's Wrath range, he will have to use a kill spell on it most likely. So if you can't kill it with, Soul Reaver, that's going to give him some trouble. And the same is with can't be targeted. Basically everything that's not Aka's Wrath is either a creature or it will target. So obviously that does mean something, though there are other options with like Hellfire, Bloater, that kind of stuff as well. But so we know it can't be targeted, Spell Ward, Dark Ward, that kind of stuff. Which kind of led me to the idea of, Cat was very dominant for quite a while, but didn't really get a lot from the new expansions. And Stronghold didn't really get a lot in general, because it was the best factor for a while. But I feel like a kind of value type Cat deck could actually do quite well against Kal-Azaar. Have a lot of high HP creatures, probably want to be running a decent number of, the Black Skull Crushers. And, you can play those, value uniques, those bigger guys, to really kind of play a little bit longer game against Kal-Azaar. So, that's just one idea. You definitely be running those, like, can't be targeted events, stuff like that. You can also run Rise of the Netherman to get those spells out of your graveyard without affecting yourself. So, I mean, I'm not saying Cat will be the king of the meta, once again, unfortunately. But, we need to look at the weaknesses, and sure, we can complain on the forums about how Kal-Azaar is too OP and we can't beat him, or we can go out there, we can test decks that could beat it, and maybe, you never know, you could find the next best idea. Even if your deck building skills aren't the best, sometimes it's just the idea, and other players will build on that, and then slowly that's how the meta changes. Also, I feel like some of the games I lose as Kal-Azaar are often when my deck, the deck I'm versing doesn't really have any creatures, because you're left with a full hand of removal spells and AoE spells that are only going to affect your own creatures. And if you have, and surely if you're a creatureless deck, you'll have enough removal to deal with the creatures Kel does play, because he doesn't play that many. So that is something to also consider. And you couple this in with the lack of healing or prevention of damage Kal-Azaar has access to. Maybe something like an Ignatius, more controlling type deck rather than the aggressive ones we've seen in the past, could possibly be an option. Slowly burn them out, deal with the creatures quite efficiently. One other thing is, I've noticed when playing Kal-Azaar is building destruction is really lacking. I feel like in most of my games I'm versing Necro or even a lot of Haven if I'm not versing a fellow Inferno deck, where building destruction is really good in those matchups. And so Boneyard decks can really kind of grind him out. Barracks is obviously a very, very, very good card, which can be problematic for Kal-Azaar as well. So we can basically kind of grind them out in the long game, possibly. Though obviously any deck with time jump is still a very big threat in the late game. So it's just a couple of things to consider, really. So in regards, do I feel like he needs to be nerfed? I don't think there needs to be huge nerfs. I think even something as simple as, the Ishima treatment increasing the hero power to cost 1 could be a bit of a nerf. In other regards, it's quite hard to say, because in the makeup of it, it's just a standard champion design of three spell schools with 18 health, and then an ability. The ability is quite strong, and probably stronger than most hero abilities. So nerfing it to 1 mana is probably fair. Though I guess compared to Mother Namaturu, it's probably a little bit worse. But I think that's fine in the grand scheme of things. Other ideas, there's not a lot rather than nerfing Inferno itself. Spell Stealer Heretic is the main issue with the deck, and it just gives it so much versatility. I think there was some talks about reducing the health so it died at Kazar, but I believe there was some talk they really actually want to keep it at 6 health so it does survive the wrath, which is interesting because I feel like the versatility of it makes up for the fact that it costs 1 mana more. So yeah, just a couple ideas. I'd love to hear what some of you guys think about, how can we beat Kal-Azaar? How can we beat all this Inferno? Because I honestly feel like in any game or any meta where apparently in some Swisses 90% of the field is playing Inferno, there's going to be a deck with the sweet spot in the meta that can really punish these decks. So just have a think about it. Like, if you knew you were going to be playing Inferno every single game, what deck would you be running? And obviously, try not to say Inferno after that. But yeah, so honestly guys, just remember, try and be a bit positive, interact with the community, and the more we make the devs feel like we're participating, we want more stuff, without whining about it, because if we tell people the game is dead, then the devs are going to start to believe it's dead, and maybe they're wasting their time here. So try and have a positive influence on the community. We all know it's a great game, and we know the reason we're here over a game with maybe better animations and clearer communication, like over Hearthstone or something, is because the gameplay is so good. And the gameplay hasn't changed throughout the history of the game, really. The gameplay has always been very solid, very interesting, very dynamic. And so let's try not to, blame the decks, or blame the balance, and let's think, how can we counter the decks reversing? And honestly, that's one of the most interesting parts of any card game to me, is, maybe you start with a net deck, but you tweak it for your own meta, you find what works, find what doesn't work, and then find out how to beat the best deck. So guys, not sure how you guys will enjoy this kind of, just discussion format, but I am really interested to hear some of you guys' opinions on this, and if you'd like to hear more kind of stuff like this, it's definitely an idea in the future, definitely worth considering. So guys, please do leave any comments below, any tips as always, or feedback, greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot guys.